Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final episode of season 3 of Queen Prophesies podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. He's part of my spiritual journey, whether or not he knows it. I'm sure on some level, there's many people that kind of steered us on the path when we were first just little curious, like fresh out of the matrix kind of babies. And Adam's podcast, as well as his astrology, really did that for me. So I'm very honored to have him as the final closing episode of this season. I'd love for you to introduce yourself, let everybody know where you are gridding from, which means basically where are you located right now on the planet, and tell us a little bit about your flow. What do you do? Who are you? Shall we call you
Gridding,
Morpheus?
is that a term that I'm not familiar with? Gridding,
Gridding, yeah, like
is it?
the grid lines, the grid worker. Where are
Sure.
you gridding from? Like, where are you working from energetically? Yeah.
Well, great introduction. It's always amazing to hear that, something I had put out there in the world helped someone on their path, right? That's incredible. So yeah, I'm in Dartmoor. I'm not English, as you can tell from the accent, but yeah, I've been essentially basing or gridding from Dartmoor since the summer of 2019 is when it began. And yeah, home here or before here was Colorado. And really what I'm up to is I think the term that really gets to the heart of it, which is the Jungian one, is constellating psyche. I think that that term points to what I've always attempted to do, whether it was through astrology or qigong or anything else that I've ever attempted to do with my writing and the podcast that I put out there. But astrology is kind of the center of it all. I give readings, I teach what the podcast primarily is about, even though there's a lot of different branches to it, and it's I suppose evolving all the time. But yeah, I don't know what else to say as far as an intro, but
No, that's
let's get to it.
perfect. Yeah. So I love that you didn't know what gridding meant because
Well, I knew it's one of those things like I know what it means when you say it, but I've just never heard someone say it. It's like, is this what the kids are saying now? Is this like what people
we're
along the path are saying now? Like I just haven't come across it.
we're almost the same age, I feel. Like I'm maybe I have a childlike spirit, but we're definitely
Well, I'm not calling you a kid when I say that. It's just like, is this what the kids are saying? Like what's another term I
the
learned
cool kids,
recently?
Adam, the cool kids.
Yeah, books open, books closed. Like when you have that on social media, it's like that's a slang I learned recently.
I've never
Books
done
are open.
I've never done that, but it kind of reminds me of when they say like, "Oh, I'm going off of social media like to cleanse for a month," and then they come back after a week and they're like super in the social media thing again. But just things that people do because this is a wild world right now in spirituality. I don't know if you feel the same. I feel like it's the Wild West all over again. And we're kind of
Okay.
yeah, what we're doing with this podcast, particularly Queen Prophecies, is we're kind of giving a different spin on the narrative of like, well, what is the spiritual journey? And is it something truly collective? Is it truly something that will reach every single person on the planet at some point? Think of the Matrix, like, will everyone have that Neo moment at some point in their life? Or is that just very Aquarian, like wishful thinking? Or is it really happening? But of course, it starts from within. So it's about your personal journey, your personal path to truth, my personal journey, my path to truth, and how it's not a straightforward path. The dragon path, the serpent path, as you know, is winding, is ever like spiraling us in and out of things, situations, realities, connections. love, hate, all of it. I mean, um yeah, it's not a one-way path for me, the dragon path. Tell us about your path. Where did you where did you have your Neo moment? What are some of the
I remember
places in the world that have been really really activating in terms of you never looking at the world the same way again?
that's a loaded question. I think probably the first would have absolutely happened when I was a teenager. Um, whether it was the traumatic events that I had as a teenager, like I had my first near-death experience as a teenager. My best friend died not long after that, and then my dad died as well. There was like this succession of really intense and all of them very surprising events that happened. And I think, especially when you just kind of get the one, two, three punch from life like that, like it kind of tosses you into deep inquiry into what the hell is this all about, and didn't have a lot of context for it, even though we were raised Catholic. I was confirmed and everything like that. Like there wasn't any rich practice or spirituality or like philosophical model that I had for the world. And I was a product of the suburbs in the 90s, you know? Um, so within that, I definitely dabbled a good bit with psychedelics as a teenager as well. And I don't regret it. Some people do because, your brain's not fully formed and you're a little young to do it. But I mean, the first time I ever gobbled any mushrooms, I was probably 15 years old. So young, especially when I'm around 15-year-olds now. I'm like, Jesus, like, what was I thinking? But it was pivotal because it did change my perspective on a lot. And by the time I was like 17 years old was probably when I began like reading the Tao Te Ching and trying to learn about the I Ching and how to use it. And like the first step was really the East and a bit of Joseph Campbell and Alan Watts. And so like those were like the first moments, but I was still kind of just like feeling around in the dark. Um, and then yeah, it just accelerated over time. So that's how I think about the beginning, like those really confused teenage years, just trying to being in the project of world building, right? So I don't know if it was my Neo moment, like that might be something else, but it was definitely my red pill moment.
Hmm. Death as the
Y-
portal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I didn't awaken in the Matrix, but I took a red pill. Yeah. If you want to use those metaphors.
Okay. Yeah, 15 years old, psychedelic initiation does sound terrifying right now if I were to think of myself like taking mushrooms because I literally waited till I was probably 29,
Wow. Yeah.
almost twice as old, and even that was divinely aligned. Of course, it's like something you can't plan because I was so rigid about plant medicine because there had been so much like abuse in my family of substances, like mainly alcohol.
Hmm.
But take your pick. I also had close relatives that were basically party party druggy people, I would say, like where it wasn't something that was an addiction, but they definitely did the rave music, like Nevada's not that far from us, that EDM, like where you just go pop something, a pill, maybe not a red pill, but like pop something and then dance all night and then do it all again like the month after and the month after. And I had no interest. I had lots of friends that were like pot people also, and I had no interest. I was like, what's the point? Like what's the point of it all? And I kind of associated everything in the same category, even cigarettes, smokers. It was like you're all over here and I'm over here. And I had that moment where that all blew up when I was in the very, very south of Mexico. And apparently, it was a place where magic mushrooms grew naturally, obviously, very tropical, very rainforesty. And it was Palenque, which was also known as kind of like a hippie little haven for many already decades, and probably since the 70s, I would say. So I was
Oh yeah.
there 2015, and the magic mushrooms came to me. Not me came to the magic mushrooms, they came to me, and they were picked fresh that morning by local people to the town. And I felt like I was given such a gift because I was so rigid. I needed that cracking. I needed that first, like, like just let the mind kind of take a back seat, because as you know, mushrooms is all about feeling. And that's what they told me. These particular mushrooms were about helping you connect to nature, helping you open your heart. And I was like, okay, that doesn't sound so bad. That doesn't sound like I'm going to have a really bad experience like people would tell me about their drug experiences, which again is also very subjective. But anyways, thought I would throw that in there.
I mean, Palenque, south of Mexico. I mean, what's so incredible about that area, historically, is that those cultures were mushroom cultures,
I know.
you know, and like all those beautiful stone carvings, and like the what's the prince's name? Jocopili, like the Prince of Flowers, like that image of him like looking at the sky and holding two handfuls of Psilocybe mexicana in his hands. It's like 1,000 years old. It's amazing. And I actually have never been down there, but I'm very familiar with the area because we, as Westerners, wouldn't have, I want to say remembered, but there isn't actually a lot of evidence, unless you go back to ancient Greece, really, of usage. And I'm sure the Druids and people around here were picking liberty caps and stuff, but there isn't a lot of evidence of that. And so it was because of Gordon Wasson visiting Maria Sabina, and that's in Oaxaca.
Mhm.
And like that whole story, if you're familiar with it,
I read the book. Yeah, I read his book and her.
yeah, and how it gets published in Time magazine, and then the horrible fate befalls her afterwards. It's a tragic story, but also a beautiful story, almost like she's a martyr for just allowing the mushroom to get out to the world and spread its spores. But I've never been down
Mm.
there to that area.
Okay, I'm just gonna throw it out there. Plants and Planets Retreat, Oaxaca.
Be amazing. Oh
Plants and
yeah.
Planets Retreat, Oaxaca. Adam.
It would be. I'm not exactly in the retreat planning space at the moment, but I think that would be incredible. Yeah, I want to do some exploration of Mexico.
Maybe I'll host it and I'll invite you.
Okay,
I
why
have
not?
a deep love for Oaxaca actually, which is also connected to the other most important medicine of our lands in the Americas, South America, Central America, is cacao. Cacao
Mm,
is highly intertwined with the Oaxacan cuisine. Like they
hmm
cooked many elaborate dishes that, had something sometimes like 40 ingredients in the sauce, and cacao was one of them. So it would taste like,
yum.
it would just taste otherworldly. I mean, and there's no other way to describe it. Some of the gifts of the Americas, Central South America, they really are just like they're for the senses. They are for feeling, they are for tasting and smelling and just really being in the moment, really being present. So that's been one of my greatest gifts, I say now, being anchored in California and just seeing like the richness that those lands have given me, not only in my blood, but in every time I've taken a pilgrimage to these lands. Every time the dragon or the serpent called, I answered. Even if I was on the other side of the world, like even if I was in Greece, as happened in my path. So I would actually love to, yeah, circle back to that question I asked. What other parts of the world, like you've been on a traveler's path. Maybe it's not what's most alive for you now, but it's definitely gotten you to where you are.
Yes, I will not disagree there. A lot of movement. Um, I mean, it's almost as if I inherited it from my parents. I mean, we moved around a good bit. I was born in Miami, and we moved to Seattle, Minneapolis, Fargo, of all places. And then I went to school in North Carolina, a few different places, and then ultimately ended up in Colorado and kind of stationed in Colorado for a good bit of time. But I would leave a lot. Like I'd leave and live on the Big Island for a year or live out west in California for a bit. Just kind of in a way what felt like just being a bit of a pilgrim on the hippie road. And then got kind of exhausted by it and became really clear that I needed to kind of slow down on maybe what was just a search and kind of allow roots to form somewhere. And it seemed like one last big trip was required for it. And so I called it the Weird Road. And I set off to visit all my family, a bunch of friends out east. So I like basically drove from Colorado all the way down to the tip of Florida and then up to Montreal. Did a bunch of events along the way as well. But like it was this final trip to kind of see like, is there anywhere that I have lived before or haven't been that is going to claim me? And if it doesn't, then I don't know. Then I don't know. Maybe I go back to Colorado and just stake it out there. And what happened is I somehow ended up in England. And the honest truth is I never once in my life had a desire to even visit England. Um, like at all. Like I
Most Americans don't. I was the same, Adam, and I ended up in
yeah.
Glastonbury. I was the same.
And actually a year before I went on this weird road trip, I was on a storytelling retreat in Crete, and pretty much everyone at that retreat was from England. It was being taught by someone from Devon, and there was just tons of folks from England. And I got on with all of them. It was an amazing experience to, just be steeped in story and English people for 10 days. And I
Like a
made
tea,
some
like
life.
a good tea, right? Good English tea steeped in
Yeah, yeah.
that.
Tea and mountain tea from Crete and wine, lots of wine. But yeah, like it was actually a eye-opening experience for me of just like how well I got on and how much I appreciated, especially English humor. Because I have that myself, like I really understand it and it's what I produce, but it usually can create a lot of uncomfortable foot in the mouth moments back in the States. But it works really well, it seems, with English people.
You do have
Um,
you do have English humor, Adam. Now that I
yeah, yeah. Well, I discovered it by being around English people. It was like this like lock and key moment, right?
your podcast has
And
lots of those little moments, which again, it's beautiful that you found where it works.
yeah, totally works. It's been great. Um, and so yeah, came here to Dartmoor, and turns out, I've been here for 5 years, that it's still my favorite place in all the UK that I've been yet. And most people agree. Like most people travel here. People get out of London and Bristol to come here. And especially during COVID, like a lot of people wanted to move out here and escape the end of the world vibes.
Hmm.
So I feel lucky in that regard. Like we really are in Dartmoor and it's like really old and cozy cottage. And yeah, like I have to leave every 6 months for visa reasons. And so I make the most of that too, doing a lot of exploration, mainly of Portugal. I've spent a lot of time in Madeira and the Azores. I'm going to Lisbon soon. So yeah, it's an interesting life, but I do feel quite rooted in our situation here in Dartmoor at the moment.
Hmm. So again, the I guess the thing that stood out to me in everything that you just shared was that sometimes you don't have to know where you're going to end up. You just have to set out if that's like the strongest calling. And crossing the whole US to see like is there somewhere that's for me? It is kind of like I I'd say it's similar to what I've been doing, except I already know the US isn't my place, but I've been doing that with the greater world. Like, is it you? Like, are you my home? Are you my home? Are you my home? And it's not that I don't believe it's possible for me to put down roots and have that same moment like you did, where it's like the place accepted me also, not just I love the place, but the place loves me. I think that's in the realm of possibility for me in the future. But I do know a little something about what the dragons have shared specifically about people that move as much as, let's say, you have or I have in my life. And it has a lot to do with like agreements. It has a lot to do with yeah, like a spiritual guardianship of certain parts of the earth. And again, sometimes we do get to graduate to that, okay, but now I get to be the spiritual guardian of this earth right here where I decide like to put my house or buy a house and like ground and just be like, I'm the earth guardian here. Um, but it turns out that I have a lot more air dragon energy. And a beautiful astrologer once told me, she said, it's like you're grounded in the air. That's going to be the key phrase for you. And I was like, holy shit, that hit me like a ton of bricks, in a good way. Because I was frightened by this like this pool, you know, and like, is it even like will it work, you know? It seems insane sometimes to other people and sometimes to the self to move that much or change that much or crave that much like from the world. But it's very natural. I've come at least, yeah, I've come to terms with that, to love that part of me too, not just to um worry about it, you know?
I think it's healthy to have concerns about it. I have it myself. Like, is this healthy? Am I running from something? Uh, and it's important to reflect and have those considerations. But what I've come to is, and especially when you understand astrology after studying it for 15 years, like I do, is a lot of this is just karma burning off. I mean, my whole chart tells this story very clearly, and I'm sure yours does too. And for me, it never even was. Maybe leaving high school into my first big move, which was to the coast of Carolina, that one kind of had a bit of fantasy to it, of thinking like my life is going to be so much different. I can't wait to get there, kind of a thing. But all the other movement mainly felt out of necessity, right? Like it wasn't driven by the grass is greener per se. It was more, I guess this is where the breeze is taking me. And so I definitely don't, if I were to have a spirit plant or a spirit vegetable that, I carried around with me, it's not an acorn. I am not a mighty oak in that sense, energetically. And if I were to be any kind of a plant, it would be mostly probably a dandelion, or clever ones that grow quickly in disturbed territories, because we've become adaptable. Like if anyone that lives like this and is still living a healthy life and they're still inspired and they have relationships, like, well, you've figured something out. And one of those skills is absolutely adaptability. And I think that's really important. You gather a lot of stories. You become of the world in some sense, and I think there's a lot of value to that. We don't have homes. We don't, in a sense, like have all of the things that a lot of people do dream about, but it'll come. Cycles, right? Cycles within cycles. It's kind of the way I see it all.
Oof. Yes to everything you just said. Yeah, I'm really I'm there with you. Like I've had to have that check in with myself often. Um, Specifically, what you said about the burning off of karma. What would you say? Okay, like if a place calls you back, not once, not twice, 3 times, 4 times, but each time isn't the same piece, isn't the same storyline. Um, the way I kind of have maybe looked at it, I'll use Spain for an example, for me personally. Obviously, most people know I have Spanish blood, indigenous blood, most of my heritage in Mexico. So I have both. I have the conqueror and the conquered. I have the Americas and Europe. And Spain was one of the first places I traveled internationally. Not the first, but one of the first. And I was pretty young. I was 20. I was in university. I lived there for 5 months in Madrid. I did a lot of traveling within Europe in that time, a lot of travel within Spain at that time during our program, which was amazing. I mean, I got to go to wine country, coastal lands, the north, the very like gray kind of feels like Amsterdam, but it's northern Spain. It's like you see the sun once in, a whole season or something. It's nice though. It's also like the territory that they have the language that has no other connections to any other language on earth. It's called the Basque Country, País
Oh, right. Yeah.
Vasco, and their language is Euskera. And if you've ever heard that language spoken, it's like it does something to your brain to hear that language. There's a few languages like that for me personally. That's
Hmm.
definitely one of them. It sounds like it's from another planet, which is amazing. It's really cool. And they're very proud of it. But yeah, all this to say, like, I've bounced around Spain a lot in that 5 month cycle, came back to the US, finished my degree, stayed here, started working, thought I wanted to work in television production, movie production. Big lessons learned there. And it took me back to Spain. It took me a cycle to get myself together here to realize America wasn't for me. I was holding on to a lot of things here, like the ideas, I should say the projections that my family wanted for me, right? They wanted me to have the life that everybody in the family had, right? Where you just slowly, slowly build yourself, blah, 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 degree, and then you do the thing here. I was the only one in the family that's like, I don't want to do anything here. But I had their pressure, right? So I try to make it work. I try to fit it in with the production, yeah, passion that I did have at the time. I thought it could be something interesting, creative, right? I wanted to be a writer also. I wanted to maybe direct eventually, but took me back to Spain, took me straight to the Celtic lands of Spain, which are very much like the England energy, the Ireland energy. There's not too many sunny days. There's lots of rivers flowing through, basically everywhere. But in this region, I remember that when I got there, the most magnificent thing to me was that I could walk to a river. I could walk to a river from my apartment, and then I could walk in the other direction and reach a second river. And I was like, it did something to me. It changed something in me. I said, in LA, you can't walk 10 minutes and not be at like a mini mall or, a shopping center or, a huge highway or, intersection of 5 highways together. Like it's insane in contrast. And everybody in this little village said, "Why did you come here? Because you're from LA, you're from California." They were over here putting California on a pedestal, and I was being humbled by the land and my ancestors in that land, in those waters, those rivers that were saying, "This is more your frequency." For a time, you need to get to know this energy. Yeah.
That's key. And what are, and yeah, the contrast that you lay out there, it couldn't be more extreme, could it? Like Los Angeles is such a beast.
Mhm.
I've never been a city dweller, but like that city is, I think out of every city I've ever been to, the most assaulting to the senses. Like it really is. And like, if you're not a fan of traffic jams, who is? Like you're in for it. Like it's absolutely next level. I don't know how people deal with it every single day of their life. Well, some people. So yeah, welcome to the rivers. And that's a big part. I mean, you bring up dragon energy a lot, and in a way, like being on a path like this, like it is a winding river. And so much like when I talk about dragons, I'm mainly referring to two things. There's so many things as well that they point to and branch out as, but like the primary one, because I am an astrologer, is the nodes of the moon, which to me is the spinal journey of our story. And so that's the way I treat it in the chart, but also when it comes to eclipses, like the ones that are just around the corner, it's always when the sun or the moon or when the sun and the moon are close to the nodes. Thus, eclipses happen because they eat them. And all the implications around that is the first thing. The second is essentially around Kundalini force and the way that all that symbolism shows up. Like we see it within the spine, you see it within the caduceus, you see it in DNA, you see it in the way that, for example, the Michael and dragon lines move, right? Like across not just England, but isn't there one that goes from St. Michael's Hut all the way down to Athens as well? Like there's one that goes southeast, and there's one that goes up to Glastonbury and Avebury and to the east of England. But like to me, that's one of the first things that comes to mind when I think dragon. But of course, I think there's so many interesting ways that we can engage dragon and serpentine energy, but it is fundamental in yeah, understanding these big questions.
So give an example of in astrology, like if somebody wanted to understand the nodes for them personally, what should they look at? I mean, do they have to be tracking every eclipse? Do they have to really get that um maybe even cycles of eclipses, right? Like where something kind of repeats,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't know the numbers. I know you do. Could
Well,
be.
not by heart. The Saros series is what you're referring to. And yeah, any given time, I think there's around 72 of them happening, in these 18 plus year intervals. And so I don't exactly have them to memory. But yeah, the simplest idea, not getting lost in the Saros series, which is the most advanced idea around it, is that wherever the nodes are at in the chart, they they very much again are kind of the spine of the story. And one of my assumptions, at least it's what astrology has taught me up to this point, is that there is this component of us being dreamt by these stories. Whether you see it through the transits and the cycles, or you see it simply karmically in the natal chart and how it's playing out, or through certain time lord techniques. But there's a story that is playing out archetypally, to use Jungian terminology, through us. And astrology is, to me, one of the most powerful tools of being able to see through symbol and time how that story is playing itself out. And the nodes are so pivotal because, well, there's a dragon at the center of every good story, right? Whether it's explicitly named or not, the dragon energy is still present in its form of power and wisdom. And so the South Node, also known as K2, is the dragon's tail, and it's the ancestral cord. It relates to the other world. And there's a lot of astrologers that also talk past lives with the South Node. North Node, Rahu, is the dragon's head, and it's basically what is pulling us forward. We spot it in people, certain roles or ways of being in the world, and it's both exciting and absolutely terrifying and exhausting to engage with Rahu.
Mhm.
It's the head of a dragon, so it is facing all. of the things that are possible with an eye to eye confrontation with a dragon. But like the way that translates in our lives is to everything that we are absolutely fascinated by, but terrified all at once. And so by really translating that story and spotting it and understanding it so clearly in ourselves, like we then have, I think, an extra layer of conscious awareness to choose how much we want to engage with, whether we're evolving or waking up or however you want to see it. I think that the exercise that we get emotionally and psychically and spiritually by constantly dealing with Rahu and then retreating back to what's comfortable and familiar is kind of what makes meaning in our life. Like there's a lot that happens as far as the connections that we make. Its language is synchronous and coincidental, and so it feels meaningful, right? Like any synchronicity you've ever had with a dragon, for instance, like all those moments are nodal moments, and you can go back and pull up the transits for those moments, and you're going to see something interesting, like the moon or Venus transiting your north node or something like that in those exact events. And it's happened to me many times like that. Um, and yeah, they're just in kind of an infinite paradox in one sense because there's such a different take on dragons and on the nodes of the moon between the east and the west. Like very, very different. And so I just love thinking about, like what is the compromise? Like what is dragon in the most universal sense? And how does that translate to the nodes, to our own stories that we're playing out? Because again, there's a dragon at the center of every good story, and hopefully our lives are a good story.
I immediately got the like the union point is alchemy.
Mm-hmm.
Dragons know alchemy. People that work with
Yeah.
dragons, energy know alchemy. Like they literally have to become the alchemist. Which, by the way, was my favorite book growing up, was called The Alchemist. And the little boy in the book, he's this poor little shepherd in Spain, and he makes his way, his dream is to make his way to the pyramids of Egypt to become rich because he had a dream about a treasure being in Egypt. It's a really simple story, but there's so many pieces in there that I've taken away with me quite literally in all of my yeah, and in all of my dragon seeking, even when I didn't know that I was seeking it. But I was born under a north node um dasa, right? Like the day I was
Rahadasa.
born,
Yeah.
we were under the north node. And
Well, it's not we, that would have been you.
sorry, me, yeah.
Yeah.
Me and my dragons were under
Yeah.
that. I was. And
Hmm.
is something I didn't really pay much attention to. I know you're the only astrologer that's ever used that little system that I've had a reading from, where you use the Vedic,
The Dasas.
the
Yep.
dasas. And now that I'm coming back to this, kind of just this point of like evaluating, yeah, like where did my dragon journey start, or was there ever a start, or was the whole life, this incarnation, is it a dragon journey for me? Um, and it's when I saw yeah, the North Node being what I was born under for a very short time. It was only a few years for me. Then I moved into something else, but um, the head of the dragon does drive me. The head of the dragon does feel like part of my purpose here. And I keep pointing to this map behind me because this is
Hmm.
actually a dragon head. For those of you that are listening, just imagine the map of Isla Menorca. And Isla Menorca is one of four islands in the Balearic Sea, the Baleares, it's called. So you might know the island Ibiza better, or the island Mallorca. So this is the one they don't talk about that much. It's Menorca. But what I was shown on the map one day, where I'm just kind of doing my thing, looking at things that I look at, like maps of places, and I was really connecting with Mallorca, which I also lived there for a year on the island, the biggest island of the Baleares. I saw a dragon in the bodies of these four islands. I basically saw they were one dragon. Menorca's the head, Mallorca's the body, and Ibiza's the tail. And then Formentera is a little teeny island, like almost like an, I don't know what you call, like an island that's kind of connected or almost connected to Ibiza, is just this little teeny tail connected to the bigger tail. So yeah, I was taken to this island last year for the first time. I was guided to go there. And some amazing dragon things happened to me while I was there. And the island traditionally was known as the Island of Fire, the Isle of Fire. Basically, in time, like Greek times, in times of, there's a lot of Greek connections here. There's a lot of ancient structures on the island that are seem impossible that they're standing. A lot of what they call taulas, so they look like these giant T's, these flat stones with a flat top that you'll see also in islands like Sardinia. And yeah, and all of these places are aligned with the stars. All of them are extremely activating in terms of if you find yourself in meditation or you find yourself guided to connect to these places. Again, it doesn't all make sense in the moment, like, well, what's happening? You probably have felt something similar when you were in stone circles, or in the Asclepians in Crete, right? It's like you don't know exactly what's happening when you're there, but you will feel the ripples of it. You'll get the revelations when it's time. Dragons also like to kind of drop you the hint and then disappear for a bit and let you figure it out, right? Or at least remember
Mm.
it, more remember it. That's the better way to say it. But yeah, I don't know where else to go with that. I just what's your take,
That's
you know?
incredible.
Yeah.
I've never been to Menorca, but I've heard a lot about these islands because my partner, they used to have a house in Majorca and sadly sold it the year that we met, but it seemed like an amazing place. And I didn't know, I mean, it makes me want to go visit even more now because of the dragon connection. But what I can say and comment on it is just how strange indeed it is that, like, when we talk about dragon, like, there's again like so many entry points, so many implications of like what do we mean? It's one of those words that's just so loaded and complex. And even when I use it, oftentimes like I'm confused about even what I'm saying. But when there's literal manifestations, like for example, the first time I ever went to Cornwall, it was right after I met my partner, and it was a rare cloudless day in July between two eclipses. So a dragon hole, which I've been calling the eclipse window pretty much since the beginning of my career because of an experience I had with literal dragon. um like we were sitting having kind of a bit of a lazy picnic on the edge of this cliff, and we were the only ones up there. And there was this moment when it became quite clear. I was like, do you see it? Like when looking out, like there was like maybe seven little rocks jutting out in the coastline, and then the last one that was kind of like turning its head and looking towards Europe was so clearly a dragon's head, right? And so we were just like taking it in and being like, oh my God, like how insane. Like we're like on the back of the dragon and like it looks perfect, almost like it was modeled, you know? And when we were in the midst of taking this in, this old man yells down from at the top of the hill and tells us to come and take a look. It's like, what? Like, like what does he want? He looked kind of crazy. Uh, and so yeah, I was the first to go, and I just like jumped up there and I was like, "What? Like, what's going on?" He's like, "Look at it." I'm like, Look at what?" And I was like, "Oh my God!" And it was this huge adder
So
that was moving through the grass, and he's like, "Mate." I'm not gonna even pretend to do a Cornish accent, but he was definitely a pirate. Very, very much a pirate, drinking a lot of rum throughout his life and probably smoking a lot of cigarettes as well. And he's like, "My whole life, I've never even seen one. This is my first." It's like, "What? Like, you've never seen a snake?" He's like, "No, no, I've never seen an adder in my entire life, and I've lived here my whole life." I was like, "Wow." Like, okay. And then my partner runs up, she sees it, and she says the same thing. Neither of them had ever seen an adder, and I was like, I was really surprised by it because being from the South, like I've seen tons of snakes, and I'm actually very, very much into snakes. Always have been. So this moment happens, and this like snake, it is very rare, like as it turns out, for people to see adders, but it is more common than these two. It seems like a good because I ask people about this from time to time. But what a moment, right? In between two eclipses on the back of a dragon, which turns out I didn't know this part at the time, is the beginning of the dragon line and the Michael line. That's St. Michael's Hut in
yep.
Penzance. And so we were just a little, it's still the line. Like it's
Mhm.
basically close to Land's End. So it's still the line. And I had no idea until I first told that story to a friend. And then you're like, "Oh, yeah, you were on the dragon line." What the fuck is a dragon line? Like all I know is I saw a dragon and then one popped out its head. That's what I experienced, and it was incredible. And so when it happens in literal ways like that too, it's just unreal. Like there is no way of explaining it. It just happens and it gives meaning to this connection to dragon.
Did you
It's really
go home
cool.
and look up the astrology of like that day, that time, that moment?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I knew that we were in between eclipses. I knew that Venus was in the process of becoming an evening star. I knew all of that, and I forget exactly where the moon was on that day, but I'm sure I have the chart in a folder somewhere. Yeah.
That's one of the things that, I have journals like full of these, stories, these moments, these I don't write down the astrology of it actually, but I kind of work more with synchronicity and Mayan time right now, which,
Hmm.
the Mayans have one of the most ancient calendars ever that's still been running, literally since probably time immemorial. And honestly, when you and I were kind of discussing recording this, I threw out some dates. Today is the Dragon Day, the Serpent or the Dragon Day. It's
Amazing.
the first day of the next 13 days that are going to carry this charge, this dragon charge, this serpentine, literally Kundalini life force. These are all things that the Mayans say are associated with Kan, which our dragon is called. Our dragon, this archetype, Nawal,
Mm,
is
mm.
Kan, but the Kan is the same as in Kukulkan, like one of the most um, well documented, I would say, story told also dragons depicted, they called it a god. They called it also just a master and a teacher because of the energy that it brought with it, I know you know more of the Mayan stuff from like was it Graham Hancock, right? Is that his name?
What do you mean by like he did write a book
He wrote a
about
book about Quetzalcoatl,
yeah, the historical fiction, yeah, that
which
one.
is equivalent to Kukulkan. So it's the same god,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
one is associated with the Aztecs and one is associated with the Maya. And they
Right.
actually have a very different take on that god in itself, even though it's supposed to be the same god, which is very confusing. but they have a different take on it. So I would even say, Mel Gibson also making that movie, which I love, Apocalypto. Like, it did something to me when I watched that film, and every time I rewatch it, it does something to me.
Mm.
They speak in a language also that's an ancient language from over there. They speak, ancient Mayan, so it's really activating. But there were a lot of confusion about, which god did what and which time period, and where were they, where did the Spanish land, and it was all confusing. Even the practices of like the sacrifice and stuff, the Mayans have very little documented about sacrificing people on top of pyramids. That is much more associated with the Aztec, the Mexica in the
Mhm.
northern, Mexico City area. But somehow they all kind of get blended together, and that's what's challenging right now. Even with the calendar, which is where I was trying to go with this, is the calendar is ancient. There's nothing that needs to be changed about it. The only thing that I guess is my different take on it right now is that you have to apply the calendar to where we are now. Like, what does the world look like now that will help you make sense for, what your purpose is or what your path is showing you, what your heart is telling you, what the dragon heart is telling you to, yeah, to make sure that you dive into it. And the Mayans, at least that are working with the calendar system right now, so in devotion to this ancient tradition, I still don't know if they are ready for like the future generations like me, where I'm not Mayan full blood. I have Mayan in my blood, and I have native indigenous Mexican blood from all parts of Mexico, actually, like 3 or 4 different parts of Mexico, even northern North America, like the US. Um, but I'm also very American. I grew up very, very much in the realms of like film, television, media, ideas, exposure to lots of different cultures, obviously through books, through television, not firsthand until I started traveling. But when I go back to the Mayan lands, actually this was my journey 2022. I go back to the Mayan lands to actually deepen with cacao. And I was hardcore rejected by like the Mayan traditionalists, I would say, even shamans. So they wouldn't necessarily maybe say that this is what happened. They might have said they were very like cordial, and they get so many people now coming to seek, right? And so they have to weed people out, as all shamans do. Everything's about timing as well, so maybe it wasn't the right time either. But I felt my little inner child was like very rejected by what I thought was going to be a homecoming, what I thought was going to be a welcoming, right? Because I saw the type of people that were in the lake villages that are into cacao and everything else under the sun. I mean, people walking around with ayahuasca and water bottles, like plastic water bottles with their little ayahuasca ready to go, drink it somewhere and do something somewhere. It was a strange place to be, really strange place to be and see
Is
that a
this
lot.
Guatemala?
This is Guatemala. There's a famous kind of spiritual center there called Lago Atitlan. Um, and I say spiritual center because it's a very important spiritual center for the Mayan people, but it also has become a spiritual center for like a blend of like kind of a mixing melting pot of other spiritual traditions. So you'll find little temples there that are teaching other things: qigong, tai chi, sound healing, womb healing, a lot of practices where tantra, like literally anything you could want to learn about spiritually, astrology, tarot, everything is there. Mayan cacao ceremonies are there now, but they're they're doing this for tourists, they're doing this for travelers who want to have a quick experience and then move on. And the reason I felt so rejected was because I was there to stay. Like my suitcase was loaded. My ticket was a one-way ticket. And, I had to do a border run at some point, go over to Mexico, and I was going to come back, left my suitcase there, and didn't go back. Because in the end, I ended up feeling uh, the timing was off. Something was off, big time. And then all the eclipses arrived, the first eclipses of 2022. And my whole world, my path was super derailed. I was redirected, in other words, is what I'm trying to say.
That's a symptom of eclipses. Plot twists.
Plot twist.
It's the easiest way of understanding eclipses. With all this fancy dragon talk, you can just think of plot twists. So, like, whatever the narrative is going in, after the churn of the dragon hole, which is the space between the eclipses, they always happen in pairs. On the other side, when looking back, you will have spotted a plot twist. And it happens not just in our personal lives, and it can be very nuanced, but like it's always there. And astrology is helpful because it points to where it's happening in your chart. And so if there's a certain planet that's affected, or just wherever they're happening, which house, angles, what have you, very helpful in the translation of the plot twist. But also in the macro sense of things. Eclipses are very much eventful. And so, being that we're moving into eclipse season, it's Ramadan, what's going to go on over in Israel and in Gaza, stuff like that. The border. We haven't even talked about the eclipse, but the big eclipse on the 8th and the whole crisscross, happens where the big uh, migration crisis is happening down there. Like what is the event? Because this year that we are in, as you mentioned, is the year of the dragon as well. And I
Mm.
don't think there's a person on the planet that wouldn't agree that they expect just next level insanity in the next 6 to 8 months. Mainly because of elections. Like there hasn't been a year in our lives where there's more elections, like primary elections happening on the planet. Like there's happening everywhere. But like the one, of course, that everyone has their eye on is the US election, which
Everyone except me. I'm not going to be here.
yeah, yeah, and
I
I'm not
can't
here,
do
but I mean it
politics.
is tough to avoid it. I mean, most people bring it up. They hear, "Oh, you're American." I mean, one of the first questions English people have is like, "So, what do you think's gonna happen?" A lot of conversations open like that these days, actually.
I would just redirect them to when are you going to get rid of the monarchy?
Yeah. Yeah, well, they're not. I mean, of course, they are interested in keeping up with the mysteries of the royal family, but it seems Americans are more interested in the royal family, in my own experience.
The only
Yeah.
interest I've had in the royal families is every time I've seen another one deceased, deceased. Is it's interesting that the time period that I lived in England, a lot of really big people exited actually in the royal family.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to say too much more because this is something that's a little bit controversial, but do your due diligence, your research about what some of these big families actually are behind the scenes, how they roll. And yes, eclipses, wars,
Are
election
they dragons?
are who dragons?
The royal family? Like they say lizards, but it also could be dragons.
Definitely not Adam. Definitely not. In my
Well, you have
humble
to.
opinion, no.
But
No.
there's certain projections of dragon energy that absolutely I think have their relevance, and especially in the West. You know, you think about how it's projected in film and movie, like that new show Damsel that just came out, or in House of Dragon and Game of Thrones, or going back to Beowulf, Lord of the Rings. Like just the way that it's depicted, like the
As this
dragon and serpent.
destructive fear, like you need to be fearful of the power and the like.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's kind of part of the distortion around dragon energy, actually. And I'm actually going to take this back to what you said about the serpent earlier in Cornwall, because yesterday was St. Patrick's Day.
Hmm.
We're recording this March 18th, and it's very well known in Ireland. I spent quite a bit of time there in the past couple of years as well. And last year, I was there for St. Patrick's Day. And I was called to a stone circle that day to actually really, really connect with the land in a way that I've never been privileged to connect with before, because a lot of dragon energy wanted to come up from the land, come up from the stones, and be felt and also be understood in a way where you're not understanding from the mind. You just know it in your heart. You just feel it. And I felt, because there were people drinking down the street on in the little village that we were in at the pub, getting wasted on St. Patrick's Day. And St. Patrick's Day to the Druids is actually, or the ancient people, some of the ancient people of the Celtic lands that are Ireland, it's a devastating actually story of what St. Patrick did. And he killed the Druids. He was trying to kill the serpent, rid the land of the magic, rid the land of the guardians, the ones that understood power, the one that understood how to wield that energy. Now, I'm not going to say that every druid was integral, because we know there's always, rotten one in the bunch. Like, if you have a lot of power, of course, you could go the other way with it. But he disconnected the people of Ireland from their magic for a good period of time. And then boom, here comes Catholicism, right? To be the new like guiding, the guiding way for the people. And something similar happened in England, I believe. So the symbology of like, I've never seen a serpent before. I've never seen a serpent before in Ireland, um, or sorry, in England. To me, it's kind of like this. I don't know, there's some thread there about how much has been suppressed, how much we've been lied to, but with the purpose of keeping everything under control again, but by the few, like the monarchies, like the people that top down govern us, but really have none of our interests. Literally, Adam, come on. These people don't have our interests
Oh, I'm not making that
at
argument.
heart. None of them. This is why I
I'm
don't
not
care about
I'm not a
elections.
royalist.
But not just the royalists. Like, this is why elections, it's like people need to take the power into their own hands. We need to take back what's ours, which is land, connection to the land, connection to the water, like the water systems. We're drinking poison every day out of the taps that they call water. And people don't have access to, honestly, the things that would bring them the life force, like the drinking water from the springs in Avalon, for instance, or places where sacred wells or sacred springs come up from the belly of the earth and
Lots of those in Ireland.
revitalize you and give you clarity and give you like all of this energy that you can't experience anywhere else in a bottled water, in a tap. And these are the things that, slowly over time they've been doing so that people can be disconnected from their power and from truth. So no,
So
they're not
you're
dragons.
not a fan of St. Patrick, I'm just gonna say. Not a
But
big fan.
you know, it's just funny how
Hmm.
things get. retold in a way that we're supposed to like be like, yay, St. Patrick's Day, or yay, whatever the misdirection is.
There's
And
more
that,
than one history to the world, isn't there?
how do you
And
feel about
that's, well, like my answer here is also going to have to begin to wrap it up because I do have to go here soon. But what I feel about that, I think that's kind of my central thesis of life in some sense, but it also bleeds into everything like my astrology as well. And it's that the world is made of stories. And it's not to anthropomorphize it, but when you think of what it means to be human and what we do together, well, we do tell stories. That's what we do when we meet and we get to know each other. And and when it comes to the histories, like of course it's told by the victors, and every once in a while there's going to be some other perspectives that make its way out there more so now than ever, thank God. It's one of the silver linings about our time and how easily we can share information because of where technology is at. But it's all about the stories. And so, in the most grand scheme, as far as the way I see it, it very much points to what Jung was talking about with the collective unconscious and this kind of archetypal landscape that we all have a connection to. And there's like a collective mind and unconscious that is shared, but like those stories are playing themselves out in enormous cycles of time, like the Platonic year or the Yuga cycle, for example, all the ages changing. But then in our own lives, like there's stories happening to the tune and dance of all of the different planets and luminaries and cycles. So there's all these different time signatures, and each one of them, is a frequency that can be tuned into that is filled with stories. And so in a way, like we are experiencing these universal tales like through us. That's why, like say through Campbell's work and a lot of other great mythologists, they notice it. Like there's all these similarities and syncretism that's happening. Um, and I think, it's like perennial. It's in a way mycelial the way stories work because when the conditions are right, and like everything is just right on time, it's like out grows a Christ figure, but there was many. It was like a huge flush. It's like one of the things that you learn when you study that time is there was a ton of characters that were actually just like Christ in the historical sense. So like why him? Maybe he was just like his message, or his flush, if we're going to use the mushroom analogy, was the biggest and most beautiful at the time. I don't know. But I think of things like this. And so when it comes to history, when it comes to the news, whether it's coming from the corporate news or your Twitter feed, everything is just a perspective in a story. And if we don't have that filter of discernment in our own mind, well, we're very vulnerable. We're incredibly susceptible to taking on the opinions of others, to thinking we know what reality is or what is true and what is not true, what is ethical, what is not. And so it's very important to kind of do our best to keep the mind open at all times, but also with a very strong discerning factor, which in a way is kind of like having Mercury in the form of the dragon, because you mentioned alchemists before. Every alchemist is going to agree that the dragon is Mercury. It's the life force, it's the spirit. And ultimately, it's the capacity of sifting through information, but also calling bullshit in stories and being able to realize, even if the story is a great story, it's very important to understand it as that. The most important of all of them is a story of our own lives. And so, one of the great shadows of something like astrology is that people study their chart, they understand their nodes, for instance, and then they identify fully with that story and all the stories associated with it. But the great riddle is that from a soul's perspective, this story is ephemeral. It's in a way a dream, right? Like we are being dreamt in that sense. It's a play, or it's leelas, as they would say in India. And if that's true, then like stories are here to entertain, they're here to contextualize, they're here to teach us a lot. But the real big story is kind of discovered when you meditate on the circle, the Enso or the Ouroboros. You know, that all opposites are one, that all stories come back to the same source, kind of a thing. And it's that perspective that is also the transcending moment when studying astrology. You realize that all these karmas, all these placements, everything about this is just a story and transitory. And I find that helpful.
Hmm. Yes. Yes, yes. The thing that stood out to me from there, and I want to honor your time, but the royal family. I'm just gonna say this.
Mm-hmm.
When I was living in England, my dragon energy was being activated. I was working with the land in a way I've never worked with the land before. Going to sacred sites every month, you know, sitting with stones, sitting with medicine, not only mushrooms, but also cacao. A lot of my work, my dragon work comes through cacao, actually. And I had a lot of challenges, a lot of a lot of feeling like I was hitting blocks in England, and even had an extraterrestrial experience that I would not want to repeat. It was
No,
something
no.
uh, which again I actually got triggered back to some type of remembrance that something similar used to happen to me when I was a child in my home in California where I was safe. And here I am living this independent life in England later on and being really, really um, careful and not sharing my energy or things that was going on in this dragon path, let's say, with too many people. But the people that I was living with, we've had a lot of karma together and we've had a lot of lives together. And yes, this can just be a story that all these people and I have these connections or had these connections and these kind of power struggles and, you know, times where some of us have been villains and some of us have been victims. But a portal opened in my house where we were living together, four of us. And I was, let's just say they were trying to get into my mind for what I knew, for things that I carried and carried in my soul. And again, this is something that, you know, people that share, I've never shared an extraterrestrial story like this, even on the podcast. And I'm not saying too much, but there was a connection to the royal family. That's the only thing that I will say. And yeah, it's a teaser. Go do your own, you know, research and connections. But I did have a beautiful kind of like I needed an integration after that experience, and I connected with somebody that's a channeler that I trust, and he basically calmed me down and said it's okay, and they didn't get what they were looking for. And later on, I also remembered that him and I, it was either before or after, but we had had another chat where he said that I was really close friends with a lot of reptiles and reptile energy, right? Reptile energy being, let's just say, yes, there's civilizations in the stars that, you know, they have nefarious placements on this earth. Now, they're not all nefarious as a species out there, lizard or not, but yeah, at the end of the day, we're all here on earth sharing this earth, and we have to figure it out. We have to follow our heart. We have to speak our truth. And yes, be open-minded, like you said. It's very important. And always come back to love, even when things are out there or challenging. It's like a big part of the dragon journey: adversity and then breakthrough, adversity and then breakthrough. I say dragon journey, but it's the human journey as well.
That's wild, that story there. And hey, with so many of the conspiracy theories coming to pass as true, I mean, why not with the next ring of the spiral of big news events be something truly interesting when it comes to extraterrestrials, or maybe instead of Alex Jones being proved right, this time it's David Icke. Yeah, stuff
Mm,
like that. It's interesting. Thank you for sharing your story. I've never had something like that happen.
I'm full of those. And then
I know.
not necessarily in that exact context, but I'm definitely full of those. But you have to like sit with Cacao and me and exchange those stories because they're not just shared with everybody. But I don't know,
No.
closing out the season of truth, somehow this piece wanted to come out. And you're in England right now, so the connection
Yeah.
is, the grid is open, the grid is speaking too.
I think I know what you mean. Like if I mean there's a stone circle just around the bend from where I live, Score Hill, ancient one, beautiful. And yeah, I have a it's not even a love hate. Like I'm attracted to them, but I've never had like any experience, say like the one I had in Cornwall on the back of the dragon at a stone circle. And I've been to many of them at this point. I appreciate them. A lot of my friends are quite knowledgeable about them, right? But yeah, and it's the same with UFOs. Like the only UFO or extraterrestrial experience I've ever had has been with the help of molecules slipping into serotonergic receptors in my brain. And I have had alien encounters that way. And so like my whole ontology around aliens is that they're actually interdimensional and they're not out there.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, I really enjoyed this conversation. It got weird in the right way with a Y and an R.
Well, there's gonna be a disclaimer, I guess, now in the introduction, but I like when things just flow and whatever needs to come through comes through. I'm an open channel for um for us to share from the heart. So appreciate you, Adam.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you too. Appreciate the space, doing the podcast. They're amazing things, decentralized creation of capturing conversations. Big
Yeah.
fan of podcasting.
Where can people find you on the web?
Just type in Adam Summer. You'll find my stuff. I have a Substack. My website's adam-summer.com. Podcast is called Holes to Heavens. For now, I might be changing the name of it, but that's what it is, standing. And yeah, I teach astrology. I give readings, and I write twice a week, do a podcast once a month, and that's about it. Yeah, you can find me online.
All right. Thank you so much. Sending love
Brilliant. You're
to
welcome.
Dartmoor, the Stone Circle, the Dragons.
Yeah. I'm close to the line. It's not exactly on the house, but it's darn close. Yeah. And it's good to know that. I never knew that until one of my friends told me, so I'm in with it.
I'm just gonna be the one
Yeah.
to say it, Adam. You still have a huge journey with dragons to go. Like, you think you know dragons,
No.
they're gonna be waking you up in the night as they did me consistently for the year of 2021. And then they're with me all the time now. Like in England, they were very English dragons. Like they had purpose for the land and what I was doing there. Later on, they morph, they transform, they're shapeshifters in the best way. But they're the best energy that you can work with. They truly, truly are. If you are a being that is just open to like expanding to heights that you never even thought were possible. So
Okay.
go on that
Well, I appreciate that. A
go on
long
that
journey
journey.
ahead.
Yeah.
That's the way it feels. Well, thank you for that.
Okay. Peace.
Nice one. Peace.